Okay, well, welcome to the August 2023 Planetarium Zoom seminar. Today, we have Ellen Torres Thompson, who is the Planetarium Lead Educator at the Lawrence Hall of Science. And she's going to be telling us about professional development for an early career planetarian. Okay, the floor is yours, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Alan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I usually can't make these meetings because I'm busy running a planetarium, but like Alan was saying before the recording, our museum is closed this week, so I actually get a break. It's really nice. As Alan said, I'm the Planetarium Lead Educator at the Lawrence Hall of Science here in Berkeley, California, and I'm excited to talk about what that role means to me, especially after I attended my first conference this summer, the Stars for All conference in Kingsport, Tennessee in June. I'm incredibly grateful to the mini grant committee for helping to fund my attendance to the conference. But before I get into the conference experience itself, I want to share some information about my personal and educational background so as to give some context as to why this professional experience has been particularly meaningful. So buckle up for story time. See if next slide. Oh, hold on, there we go. So I graduated from UC Berkeley class of 2021 a couple years ago with a Bachelor of Arts in Astrophysics and South and Southeast Asian Studies. When I came in as a freshman, I knew I wanted to study astrophysics because I had been a space nerd ever since I was a little kid. And then my junior year, I was taking some Filipino language and cultural classes to get more in touch with my roots, but I ended up taking so many of them that I accidentally got a second major, so that was fun. It was definitely the easier half of my degree, though. Of course, astrophysics at Cal is really hard, particularly because I was a first-generation low-income student. So neither of my parents went to university. They couldn't help me at all with the college application process, nor with the culture shock I experienced when I found myself in STEM courses surrounded by students who had had way greater opportunities for college preparation in high school than I had. In fact, my high school didn't even have a physics course I could take. So my first physics course was at Berkeley, and I failed it the first time around and then retook it. Then I took another physics course that I failed, because something to know about some institutions, lower division STEM courses, is they are often weeder courses, right? So they're purposefully designed to be more difficult than they really need to be, to intentionally weed out students. But I said, oh no, you can't weed out me. So at the end, I came out on top, even though my senior year was the pandemic year. So my last year of school was fully online. That was certainly a time. During this time of being in Zoom classes for 6 hours a day, I was also filling out grad school applications, which was another new experience for me, being first generation. No one in my family had ever gone to grad school, of course. I was accepted into New Mexico State University, where I completed 1 semester of an astrophysics PhD and was absolutely miserable because I was terribly homesick for California, the Bay Area in particular. I also came to this realization that I really didn't want to be spending my life sitting down coding in Python all day. I do like coding in Python and making spectra, but it was difficult for me to realize that I wasn't really happy on this research route. I had told myself I was going to be a professional astrophysicist since I was 6 years old, but I had to remember that I didn't really know what that meant when I was a little kid. I certainly didn't even know what it meant until I was actually getting a taste for it as a grad student. So I withdrew from the program and moved back to the Bay, which is a decision I've honestly been grateful for every day ever since. The one part of grad school that I did really enjoy, though, was being a teaching assistant for an introductory astronomy course. There's a picture of me at my classroom there. I really loved leading lab sessions, especially since I was teaching students coming from a variety of majors. So I was getting to really break down fundamentals, which is something I really like doing. I enjoyed hosting office hours. Here's me in front of my office, even though my office was cramped, being shared with 2 other grad students. So as I was trying to figure out what to do with myself when I came back to California, I realized not only did I really like teaching in grad school, but actually my passion for teaching was a pattern. Lo and behold, my favorite part of my undergrad experience was working at the Lawrence Hall of Science. So I was a student presenter in the planetarium for a couple years. When the pandemic rolled around, I created a YouTube video series called Astrophysics Fridays, where I wrote scripts, I did some of the presenting, and I did a bunch of editing and such, basically producing. So that was a series I worked on for a couple seasons. And then we started to slowly reopen. So the summer after I graduated, the inside of the building was closed, but we had some museum science activities outside on the plaza. So I came back to work at that time and was doing some facilitation in a role that we just call public education specialist, pretty general. And this is a photo that I had a coworker take of me on my last day because I was convinced that I was moving away to grad school and I would never ever work at the Lawrence Hall of Science again. So I had to get a picture of my very last day. Spoiler alert, it was not. So after my whole grad school stint, I had a brief stint as a freelance tutor, and I ended up returning to the hall in summer 2022 as a summer camp instructor, actually. So I led instruction in a bunch of astronomy-themed camps for different age ranges in elementary. At that time, our new planetarium was under construction. So this is a picture of me in the inflatable dome that we had giving a program for some summer campers. Towards the end of the summer, I was just knocking on some doors, asking if there might be a job for me in the new planetarium, and some folks in management agreed to actually write a job for me. While construction finished up, I worked on the museum floor, basically just subbing in wherever help was needed, which was actually a pretty fun time. So even though I'm an astronomy person, I can, in an emergency, present the Animal Ambassador program at the Lawrence Hall of Science. As construction finished up in the winter, I was given the role of Planetarium Lead Educator, and I got an office again, which I only share with one other person instead of two. This is me and my mom. She came up to visit me this summer and was really excited about my name being on the door. Something she always tells me is that I'm the first white collar worker in the family. And I like to kind of joke around about that. I'll say, oh, but I'm wearing a blue collar because the Lawrence Hall shirt is blue. And in the winter, I have this blue vest going on. But in all seriousness, it is a really big deal that I have achieved a level of financial security that was unattainable for my parents and my immigrant grandparents. So this is all to say that coming into this career has been a bit of a windy road for me. It's definitely not where I imagined I'd be just a couple years ago. And when I returned to the hall, obviously I was a lot happier than I was in grad school, but a year ago I was still having a lot of mixed feelings, asking myself, oh, what am I really doing with my life? Should I go back to school? And for several months, I was feeling that my work was just a job, not a career. It was a job that I loved, but it's something that I do, and then I go home and maybe don't think about it as much. But this perspective started to change as my role in the planetarium evolved. I did a lot of development on top of presenting and training this spring in May and early summer in June. And the real turning point in my perspective of my work was the Stars for All Planetarium Conference. So I learned a lot at this conference. In the weeks leading up to it, I was super anxious. I had very little context for what a professional conference would be like due to hailing from a blue-collar family. I was really worried that people would be snubs and I wouldn't be taken seriously due to my youth and being new to the field. But in retrospect, I realized I was being really silly because, of course, everyone was incredibly kind and welcoming. I befriended lots of fellow early career professionals. I actually led the charge in making sure that we would all stay in touch by making a Discord server, which is still active today, a couple months out of the conference. And I made positive connections with several experienced planetarians. No one called me a baby. I found myself constantly being mentored and looked after. I also learned, to my surprise, that conferences are fun. It wasn't all work and no play. The Constellation Shootout was really fun, although I will say, I think it was a little rigged because my friend Maddie here got outed for getting like the tiniest mistake on the Torres constellation. And then the second to last person to be eliminated right before somebody won was getting a lot of slack from the judges, but that's neither here nor there. It was fun. I had fun at trivia night and karaoke. I sang my standard, which is the Rainbow Connection in a Kermit the Frog voice. It's not very good, but it's always fun. And the hospitality suite was a really good time. I was pleasantly surprised by there being an open bar. If you were at the conference, you might have seen me at 8 a.m. workshops wearing sunglasses. It's all good. There were so many fun recreational activities, so big shout out to Adam Thans and his team for organizing so many fun things. I loved exploring Bay's Mountain Park. I was just floored by how beautiful the nature was. The whole area is so green. I enjoyed the barge ride. Ranger Bob was iconic. If you know, you know, Ranger Bob. I was on the Gray Fossil Site tour with Alan. We learned a lot, and I loved how our guide found out that we were all educators and was really excited about that. Like, he got really into answering all of our very detailed questions. I also greatly enjoyed the storytelling performance on the final night, during which I saw a firefly for the first time in my life. There's a picture of the firefly I managed to snap. Moving on to the more serious side of things, though, the biggest takeaway I had from the conference was that I am part of a rich professional community, full of people who genuinely care about each other and really deeply love their work. The whole time at the conference, Alan was going around introducing me to people, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you're so lucky to have Alan as your mentor. Like, Alan's a celebrity in the field." There was actually one interaction which really stuck out to me. I think, Alan, it was when you went up to John from Ash Enterprises, and he looked like he was about to leave. So Alan was like, "Oh, sorry, you're leaving." And John just goes, "Oh, well, I was, but now you're here, which is more important." And that exchange just struck me with a thought of, oh, wow, like, this is a community. People really like each other and care about each other. I greatly appreciated the openness of speakers and attendees I chatted with about how this professional field, with the majority of fields, has historically underrepresented most of society. Even Michael McConville, the IPS president, talked about how this field used to be a lot more cis white men, and it's a big accomplishment that we're seeing more women and people of color as planetarium professionals these days. Actually, a big motivating factor for me going into the conference in the first place was that I wanted to represent that there are young queer women of color in this field. So I was really pleased to have my identities respected and also to encounter a lot of other diversity. There were a lot of other queer people. That was really nice. Of course, there's still work to be done on these fronts in the field, but I have a lot of confidence in the openness and acceptance and celebratory nature of this community. All week long, I was inspired by talks and conversations highlighting the importance and depth of our work. Another Michael McConville quotation, I wrote down a lot from his keynote speech at one of the lunches, but one that I really liked was a spin on Carl Sagan's "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself," which was him saying, instead, we are a way for the universe to tell others about itself. And that line just really resonated with me as someone who has been fascinated with the field of astronomy pretty much all of my life. And I think once in a while, I just really need that reminder that being an astronomy educator, especially in the immersive space of a planetarium, means that I get to share my love of the cosmos, which I am part of, with my fellow humans. And I just think that's a really beautiful thing. On a similar note, during the Answering Difficult Questions workshop, one of the wisest people I had the honor of meeting, Dr. Jean Creighton from University of Milwaukee, got hit with a role-playing, presenting a situation where someone asks a really out-of-pocket question in a planetarium program, which was somebody saying, "My sister is sick, is she going to go to heaven?" And that's a really difficult thing to tackle in a live interactive program, right? But Jean did this amazing job of first acknowledging this hypothetical visitor's pain and saying, oh, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. I hope your sister gets better. But then very politely and thoughtfully redirecting the question into science, specifically into, this idea that we're all made of star stuff. And I don't know if I transcribed this verbatim, but part of what she said was, you will find your sister among the stars. And that was just really beautifully stated. I think the interwovenness of the human experience and the study of astronomy is really critical to my pedagogy and why I love what I do. So once again, just hitting me with this inherent romanticism that I see in astronomy. Thinking about all of this has really given me a strong sense of purpose. And yet another quotation that I don't know who said it, might have been Michael, might have been during the IPS financial equity report, but somebody said, we do what we do because we freaking love it. And that really just sums it all up. I brought a lot back from the conference with me, so I got some confidence that I'm doing things right during the mini lips and the misconceptions in science, as well as answering difficult questions workshops. I found that, me and my fellow educators are on a lot of the same page. A lot of the activities and techniques we were talking about were things that I'm already doing. And so I felt good about myself in that way. It's really gratifying to discover that so many of us are on the same page when we think about maximizing audience engagement, making visitors feel heard and respected, even when you're trying to correct a misconception, rather than saying that's wrong, saying, oh, that's a really good idea, that's good intuition, but the reason for seasons is actually the tilt or whatever, or even redirecting an out of bounds question like Jean did in that example. I brought back a wealth of programming, training, and collaboration ideas. One thing I was really excited about was laser shows. When I went back to the Lawrence's director of digital media, Sarah Lefton, she shared my excitement. And so she's actually working on organizing some trial runs of laser shows this November. Very exciting. Alan and I spoke with colleagues at Fisk Planetarium about using some of their in-house made assets in our shows. So that's something I need to write an email about when I get the time. I was inspired by Renee Carrington's work at Peoria Riverfront Museum on the planetarium passport concept. Someday I'd like to do something very, very similar at the hall, but the one bit I was thinking I could take from that, which I've communicated to our marketing department, was the stickers in the passport, but rather than having the passport, I'm thinking I'd like to have stickers made for my Planetarium Pilots exhibit, which I'll talk about more in a bit, but basically just give kids a sticker that says, I piloted the planetarium. So we're working on that. Let's see, other things I got excited about. Richard Gellerman, I think it was, from Hardin Planetarium, led an activity on making up your own constellation stories. So all of these small groups got a picture of a constellation and had to, wipe our memories of that's supposed to be Ursa Major and rather see it as something new and come up with a story. My group got Ursa Minor, and so we wrapped the fact that it's the polar constellation into our story by saying it was a fish swimming in a circle, and we named it Sisyphish. I thought that was very funny. So I'm using that activity actually in a volunteer training that I'm running next week. Another really exciting opportunity for collaboration that came up, this was sort of ironic, was I met my across the bay neighbors in Tennessee. So I met Jackie Benitez and Dan Tell from Cal Academy of Sciences. Like, wow, it took being in Tennessee for us to meet, even though we're neighbors. But they were telling me about this idea that's been floating around, which I'm sure many people of here also have heard about, doing a Bad Lips, a Bay Area Domes live interactive planetarium symposium, which sounds really fun in concept. And also I think we should just do because it's a really fun acronym. And of course, I brought back lots of cool souvenirs. So in my office, I have my shrine of trinkets and I got a bunch of cool t-shirts. Another really important thing I brought back from the conference was a greater respect for my work and myself, specifically in terms of what I deserve for the work that I do. So the IPS Financial Equity Report was really eye-opening for me. I felt really seen by one of the panelists saying, hey, institutions know about the gap between your real work and your title, which was really interesting to me. You know, I have this sort of nebulous title of Planetarium Lead Educator, but at the conference, Alan was going around introducing me as the new planetarium manager at the Lawrence. And I was thinking, oh no, I'm not a manager. But then I would talk to folks who had the title of manager at their institution. And when they told me what their job was, I was like, oh, you're describing my job, which is interesting. So, you know, I sort of had this suspicion for a while that I was being undercompensated at the hall, but that was really confirmed by going to the workshop detailing this report. And so in addition to the report, I had a lot of conversations with folks about unhealthy workloads and unfair compensation, especially given the quality, quantity, and reach of our work as educators. So when I came back to the hall, I actually had a talk with some folks from the HR department, and they were really open to it, actually. They encouraged me to write up a summary of how my role has evolved since I'd been hired. So here I have a breakdown of the most intense work week I ever had, which was actually the week before the conference. So we have all of these tasks in my job, a lot of which I've added on that were not in my original job description. And then the percentage of time where 100% is supposed to be 40 hours. So the percentage of time I'm spending on each task. And you can see that the total is 142.5%. because I worked 57 of 40 hours that week. So HR really respected my report. They said they're gonna make me whole, pay me for the overtime I worked. And management is actually in the process of awarding me a stipend for the work I've taken on beyond my original responsibilities, as well as actually reclassifying my role by developing a whole new role that for fairness will have to be posted and I'll have to apply for and interview for, but I'm very happy to do all of that. Along these same lines of fairness and work-life balance, one of my favorite moments at the conference was during hospitality suite. A couple fellow early career folks and I were actually in a bathroom just talking about work-life balance, and specifically how it's really hard to say no when someone at work asks you to do something or gives you an idea for a new project and you're already overloaded, but you don't know how to say no. And again, it was Renee Carrington who was there and overheard us. And this was very dramatic, but comedic. She gathered us in a circle to bestow a piece of wisdom upon us, which was that you have every right to reply to an extraneous request with, "I'm sorry, I'm unavailable." And we all just were in this circle and we started chanting this in unison, just drilling it into our heads. It was really funny, but also really gratifying. Just, "I'm sorry, I'm unavailable. I'm sorry, I'm unavailable." So I'm really trying to exercise that more often these days. And of course, one of the most rewarding things I got to do at the conference was giving a talk, probably the biggest jump in professional development that I had. I was really nervous leading up to the talk. I had one of the last talks on the last day, so I got to be anxious about it the entire week. And then I felt bad. I felt bad about being nervous because I actually have years of public speaking experience. I did competitive speech in high school and college. I was a theater kid. So on top of feeling bad about the talk, I was feeling bad about feeling bad, like, oh, why am I so nervous? This should be a piece of cake. But, I had to give myself some grace in remembering that, well, this is something that's new to me. It's my first professional talk. It's not a talk for a class or an extracurricular club. It's a stepping stone in my career. So I gave myself those words of comfort, and thanks to lots of practice to my stuffed animals in my hotel room, my talk went very well. The Q&A went several minutes over time, which it was lucky that it could, since I was the last slot in the room that I was in, so Q&A could keep going, and folks showed a lot of excitement about this project. It was verified to me that it really is the first thing of its kind. And I was receiving compliments in the hallways the rest of the afternoon. So I came away from the presentation very proud of myself and very proud of my work. And in speaking of that work, I've talked a lot about the conference now. I'm happy to talk more about it shortly. I could even break for questions here, if that makes sense. But I do want to give a summary of the project I presented at the conference, which is called Planetarium Pilots. Especially if you were at the conference but missed my talk, I can give you the talk now. And I also have some updates on it. But maybe I'll pause here. Questions? Is the chat all sign in? All right. Well then, I will move on to Planetarium Pilots. So DOMA's exhibit, Planetarium Pilots, this is an idea that was conceived of at the hall quite some time ago and didn't get off the ground for a long time. So I'm really honored to get to be the developer finally bringing it to fruition. The idea is that rather than existing solely as a theater space, our planetarium dome is an exhibit hall in between shows. Right now, we're running this exhibit from 1:45 to 2:45 p.m. daily every day. That's the slot we identified this summer that we could most reliably staff it. It's physically possible if you only have one planetarian for that one person, it would be me, to give all of the programs, all the live programs in the planetarium, do the 2 programs we have at Science on a Sphere, and facilitate pilots. It can be done. It's a very exhausting day, but it's possible. And so this exhibit, it can be run by any member of our staff. It's cool if it's an astronomy person like me, but the idea is that it's very self-guided. The GUI is giving you all the information you need. So we could have, a volunteer in there, someone who has just been trained on troubleshooting the equipment and knows some crowd management, right? So when a group of visitors enters the dome, an exhibit docent leads them to a tablet you can see here, on which they are presented some exploratory options to choose from. And if a group comes in while someone else is already at the tablet, then the staff in the room is saying, oh, hey, you can take a seat, you'll get a turn soon. So that's the sort of crowd management that we need to have for this exhibit. So, let's say you're the first person to come in, you go up to the tablet. This is what you see. This is the first page of our graphic user interface right now. And it's deliberately only mildly interesting. We don't want this to be super pretty because we want people looking up, not down at the tablet. There are 3 options to explore right now: the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe. Right now, we actually have a graphic designer working on an updated version of this aesthetic. And on the content side, another thing we're going to add to this page is a 4th option to explore the sky, in which you can look at constellations and eclipses. So we're excited for that. But for now, let's say you select solar system. So on the tablet, you see a wait screen. Right now, it's a little rocket. And meanwhile, on the dome, a zoom out to the edge of the solar system plays, along with a voiceover. So I'll play a little example of this now. Hopefully the audio works, but it's okay if it doesn't, because you will recognize the voice. All right, so right now, all the voiceovers we have on the system are me recording on a laptop, but we're in the process of booking a professional recording studio for some higher quality audio. And eventually we want to have captions either on the tablet or perhaps even on the dome. I definitely have dreams of getting the voiceovers done by speakers of different languages. So then on the home page, you would actually have a language selection option. So once you have gone out to the edge of the solar system on the planetarium dome, your tablet is showing you a selection of solar system objects. And let's say you want to see Jupiter, one of my favorites. Here's what you'll see on the dome. All right, so we've gotten to Jupiter, and now there's a lot of things to explore. There's a touch icon here saying that you can actually touch the tablet to rotate the planet around, and we're working on figuring out how we can get more degrees of kinetic exploration in there. So rather than just rotating, is there a way that we could have visitors zooming in and out? We have a wireless mouse we need to test that might be a bit more intuitive than the tablet movements. In addition to moving the planet around, we have a selection of questions to choose from here, and also you can fly to one of the Galilean moons. If you're done with Jupiter, you can go back to the solar system, or you can go all the way home to the original page with solar system, galaxy, universe. When you click more questions, we do have 2 questions for Jupiter, and really scaffolding out each subject into more interactive steps is something that we're working on. Especially sometimes it makes more sense for a concept to be nested. So an update that I'm working on this week is with the Milky Way. So if you had selected Milky Way, you have this set of questions. If you pick the question, what is the Milky Way made of? Then you get a little narration that just gives you a list of things the Milky Way is made of. So the Milky Way galaxy is a disk of hundreds of billions of stars. The disk has spiral arms and a central bulge. The galaxy is surrounded by a spherical halo, and it is filled with mysterious dark matter. So you get that little voiceover, but then you also get a selection of questions where each item of that list can be detailed more upon. So what are the spiral arms, and what's at the center, what's in the halo, what's dark matter? So a lot more of the scaffolding is something that we are working on. Pretty exciting. Thinking back to the conference, I really was just so floored by how much excitement for this project there was. When I had started working on it in spring of this year, Alan kept telling me that it was the first exhibit of its kind, and I had this anxiety that, oh, what if I do my talk and then someone raises their hand and says, we've been doing that exact thing for 20 years, and I'll say, okay, goodbye. But it really is new and exciting, so it's a lot of fun to be working on. And I think I really also need the reminder that it's cool, because sometimes I'll get really bogged down in the programming. I'm just sitting here pressing buttons and I'm like, big deal. But no, it is a big deal. We're letting kids drive the planetarium. Thinking about the programming I just mentioned, we're building this in WorldViewer. So WorldViewer is a media mashup tool by the Illuminati that you see that composer for here. The astronomy visualization we are seeing is open space, developed by the American Museum of Natural History. So here we have the chapters of different content. There's the main menu, there's a solar system, there's a chapter for each solar system object. The first sort of code block here is for WorldViewer. So the program being told to play the Jupiter voiceover in that last example and play the wait screen. I also have these little lines here that tell it to stop a voiceover if someone tries to pick something else in the middle of one, so they don't overlap. That was a fun thing that I had a problem with before I thought to do this. And then the next code block here is for open space. So here we have a line just telling us to fly to the Jupiter object. So this program has been really successful over the summer. At the conference, I reported on the beta test that we ran May 20th through 21st, which this photo is from. Also, thank you, Alan, for taking these photos. And many of our observations from that weekend have continued to repeat themselves over the summer. First of all, engagement is huge. I often approach a kid who has been at the tablet for a long time, choosing a whole bunch of objects, and I have to say, hey, friend, let's give someone else a turn. And then there's also instances of parents having to drag their kids out of the planetarium. That's always fun. One thing we've been pleasantly surprised by is the patience that folks have to wait a turn. So my intuition at first was that people would want to rush the tablet, but actually people come in and they gently sit down and they politely wait their turn. Sometimes someone takes a turn and then they actually sit back down and just enjoy the experience that another visitor is curating. So that's really cool. One thing that we're hoping to upgrade to improve the experience is the lighting in the room. One reason perhaps why people might be sitting down so quickly is that it's dark and they're trying to get their bearings. So we're hoping to get some better lighting in there to make it a bit safer. But thinking more about these qualitative observations, as expected, top interests are within the solar system, primarily the gas giant planets. And unexpectedly, we've been pleasantly surprised by a bit of an absence with eyes being glued to the tablet. So most of the time, kids are actually pretty good about picking something and then immediately looking up. And something that's most surprising to me is that sometimes they'll pick something and then run to sit down, like they want to get a full experience of sitting in the rocket ship. So that's pretty cool. And then they run back up to press another button. On the quantitative side, I've been keeping track of some data this summer. Numbers aren't exact. I'm usually relying on a teen volunteer with a little hand clicker to count visitors to the exhibit. But some approximate numbers. Between June 24th and August 20th, we've had approximately 2,200 visitors to the exhibit. This averages to about 50 guests per day, though it's notably much busier when there's a large group of visitors to the museum, like a youth program or a summer camp. And then I expect that during the school year, the experience will be really busy when we have a big field trip class in the room. So I think the maximum people we've had in Planetarium Pilots was in the 80s. And then on a really slow day, we had 4, but those 4 did stay for a long time. On average this summer, about 10% of visitors stop by Planetarium Pilots, while about 12% buy Planetarium show tickets. So I've been really interested in comparing the popularity of this exhibit with the popularity of our regular interactive shows, which are an additional cost on top of admission. So I know that cost can be a real barrier where people don't want to go to a show because they don't want to spend any more money. So I'm hopeful that Planetarium Pilots gives them an opportunity to experience the planetarium without having to spend more money. And then for those who can't afford it, I hope that being in the planetarium gets them excited and they go and buy a ticket. One interesting thing is that, because we have this one slot when we can reliably run it, there's only one more show after that slot that people can go buy tickets to that day. So I don't really know how to go about tracking data on whether maybe someone comes to Pilots and then they come another day for another earlier show in the day. But maybe sometime in the future, we might have better staffing and be able to have Pilots open more often. So that would be cool. I'm excited to be continuing development on this project kind of indefinitely. It's certainly the sort of beast that just keeps growing bigger and bigger as we think of more stuff to add and as more things in space are discovered that need to be added. And again, it was a huge honor to present on it at the Stars for All conference. All right, so in conclusion, thank you again to the Mini Grant Committee for funding my attendance at the Stars for All 2023 Planetarium Conference. I know I said a whole lot about the conference, what I learned, what I brought back with me. I built a strong professional network. I have all these exciting ideas. I fully came into this understanding that I am part of a vibrant, welcoming field. I have a career in a strong professional community. But if I were to sum it all up in one word, that word would be transformative. And finally, a key takeaway I want to give from this talk is that I learned professional development opportunities are also opportunities for personal growth. The level of personal and professional fulfillment I gained from the conference was incredibly meaningful as I looked back on my personal background, on my struggles of being a first-generation university student and having left an old dream behind in search of greener pastures, but I found them at the Lawrence Hall of Science. something that I saw as just a job maybe a year ago, I'm now really seeing as a career, and I can see myself on this path for a long time. All right, that is all I have. Any questions, comments? I'm happy to chat.
Ellen, thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. I think you can anybody can unmute and can hear the applause of the group here. It was really nice. And it is open to questions now. Carl, you're on mute. You're muted, Carl, if you're trying to speak.
No, I unmuted to applaud, and then I muted
okay.
again. I didn't have a question at this time. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, Rosemary, your hand is up.
That was great. Great presentation you had at the conference. And I'm just curious, because I'm not familiar with World Viewer, as to how easy it was to implement what you just showed, or how much programming behind the scene you're having to do.
Great question. All right. I think it's really easy, but I might be biased because I had to take intensive Python programs at Berkeley. So maybe it's a little hard, but it's basically just what you're seeing in the slide. I mean, there's even an option with World Viewer where using OpenSpace, I could actually press record and then do a fancy flight path that I want to do with just a GUI, just clicking things that say fly to Jupiter and then stop record. And then it prints out the code, which the OpenSpace code is a luau. I don't know what's under the hood of luau. I'm sure there's many hoods. It's turtles all the way down. The OpenSpace or the World Viewer code is OSC, which I asked Adam from the Illuminati about, and it's sort of custom, but it's based on some audio processing software, which I think is interesting. So I think it's pretty easy to implement. It can just be a little bit tedious because, I'm having to program every single one of those buttons to do things. And then with the questions, it's like, all right, this question has to play this voiceover. There's also supplementary visuals at play. So with Jupiter, if you select the question that says, how many moons does it have? Then, the voiceover says, oh, it has over 80 moons. The 4 biggest were discovered by a scientist named Galileo. And then a little picture of Galileo shows up. And maybe there's a way to automate this I could figure out. But right now, I'm just manually timing at what point in the recording do I say Galileo. And then I have to say, play clip Galileo image at 001 seconds or whatever. I do see some things in the chat in reference to my complaining about the Constellation Shootout. John Bell says the judges wanted the bull's legs included. I guess justice for Maddie Phillip, but I guess
I can't recall exactly. It seems to me that it might have been the shoulders. Were you trying to point out Torres? Is that what you were working at and the judges said no? Or
it wasn't me. I was scared to do the Constellation Shootout, but it was my friend I had made.
Oh, well, then this is my opportunity to tell you, please compete next year in Memphis. We're going to go to Memphis. So
Ooh,
yeah, don't be the hardest thing in the Constellation Shootout. I've seen so many people. Virgo's the toughest one because you got to go all the way over toward Libra, then you get all the way back over toward Leo. It's a lot of stars. A lot of people go out and play. The easiest way to win the shootout is just individual star names because you either have it or you don't
I was
have.
noticing that. I was like, this
That's
is
the
a
strategy.
trick.
Plus, it helps when you roll the stars to know all the star names and the circumpolars. You notice that Ariel and Danny and it might have been Sam Storch. They were just knocking down all the stars in Cassiopeia and in the Big Dipper. Like that's because they're always going to be up there. The way says, oh, I'm going to point out the star Fomolo, and then Fomolo sets on you, and then you're stuck. So it's always good to know the circumpolars. But I do encourage you to do it. It is very stressful because, like your presentation here today, excellent. Thank you. But I know that it's always stressful to talk to your peers as an expert because, to a bunch of kids in the planetarium, hey, you can tell them anything. You want it to be right, but they're not going to challenge you. But when you do Q&A like this, everyone's going to say, wait, no, I know better. It goes with the territory, I guess. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, please. So I look forward to seeing you. Are you coming to Memphis next year? That's my question.
That's a question for the Lawrence Hall of Science. We'll get back to you. Thank you.
It's going to be great.
So do we always meet in Tennessee? Is that the thing?
It
Up with
seems
that.
to be moving in that direction. I like Tennessee. It's a great.
Let's see. By the way, John, thank you for those insights as to how to do how to win the Constellation Shootout. I was not aware of those little nuances. Jim, you're the next one.
Yeah, Alan, I have to curious, when you do this kind of project, you ever get like, do you have anything on the black hole, or you have anything on this or that that's not listed part of your pilot? Did you get a lot of requests outside of what you already had listed?
In the planetarium shows, as well as pilots, we're always getting requests for things that we don't have. People always want to see the black hole, and I'm like, I don't have a button for it. So that's definitely something we want to add. I mean, right now we just have in the Milky Way build, you hear there's a black hole at the center. I could throw up a picture of Sagittarius A star, but it would be cool to have deeper exploration of black holes. So that's on the docket in the galaxy build out, to have a black hole example, a nebula example, all kinds of DSOs. I know Brian Mendez, our planetarium director, has lots of great ideas for that portion as well.
And also, I would imagine you get a lot of questions about exoplanets or
Oh,
other
yeah.
planets. Yeah, you have solar system on your list, but I'm sure that if you have anything on any of the Kuiper Belt or anything like that, I would imagine that can explode a great deal.
Yeah.
That's a lot of buttons you have to create.
Lots and lots of questions about exoplanets. There are data sets in open space that allow you to, mark the Kepler field and have little dots showing where in the sky all the confirmed exoplanets are. So that's something that I could add today. But as far as really wanting to get visualizations of exoplanets and say like, oh, here's a 3D artist conception of TRAPPIST-7A or whatever, is something that we got to figure out how to do. I think Brian wanted to say something.
Well, I'll pick up on what you were just saying, like based on the new version of open space that Micah showed us, like all of that is possible.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of getting the right imagery and programming it. And I was talking to Brian Abbott at AMNH last year about the black hole at the center of the galaxy. And something that everybody wants, and we'll just see who, I guess, makes it first, is everyone wants a 3D version of the black hole that we can actually fly physically to. And so it's coming, but I don't know from where just yet.
Yeah, I would think, Brian, you would say, I am not available. I mean, Alan was talking about that. I am not available. I mean, you could say that, right?
I'm not going to say it to a kid, but
but that I was just thinking that another thing, did you have like any panel? Did you have a panic button that they said, "Oh, I don't want this. I want this"? And did you have anything like that set up on your panel?
yeah, the back button on the wait screen will interrupt. So, Jupiter is, kid presses the back button, it goes back to the solar system display.
Want to just interject, if anybody who came in late, if you didn't sign in with your name and where you're from, please do. And the next question is going to be from Andy.
And I did come in late, so I'll sign in after I ask this question. Actually, I have a couple questions. This is I came in late, so I had good timing right when you were starting the Planetarium Pilots presentation. Really cool stuff. So thanks, really exciting thing for people to do. One question is, I'm just curious about when you're developing languages, what's the profile of visitors at Lawrence Hall, that, what are the languages you're looking at? And then the other thing you're talking about, kids want to press the buttons and then sit down. Is there any thought to, running it wirelessly on a tablet so they could do it from the seat and not have to do that? Because I noticed you had a Digitalis system. You're not using that for this, but it's so fun to give people the wireless controller and have them fly around a planet. Same idea. So those are a couple questions. So, but thanks for the presentation. It was really great.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. So with languages, I believe the most commonly spoken languages in the Bay Area, we would want to incorporate are Spanish, Mandarin. I speak some Tagalog, so maybe I could be the Tagalog voiceover person. Maybe I could get one of my Filipino history professors to do it, who would do it a lot better. But I have big dreams. I want to get everything in there. And it's also like, what languages do our staff speak? Like, we have a planetarium student who speaks Indonesian. I have one person who speaks some Mandarin. So what is spoken in the Bay Area versus what do we have the resources for? Or maybe we have to hire someone outside of the hall to do the recordings. So
yeah, you could even reach out to colleagues in astronomy in those countries too.
Yeah, definitely. And then question on the tablet. We've tried handing the tablet to kids, but there have been some issues with the toddler grip, like accidentally turning it off, or they get really excited touching it, and then like the Windows menu accidentally shows up. So there's some world viewer tech things to be sorted out there. We're working on getting a movable lectern. So if you think sort of about I think the one place that we see these the most are hospitals, like big tablet carriers that are on wheels, and you can move it up and down and you can drive it around. So having something like that to bring the tablet to people would be cool. Right now, it's mostly like come up and operate the tablet at the console, at the table in the center. With really little kids, I'll bring it down and I'll kneel down to them, but I'm holding it and they're able to touch it. I think that answered all of that. I don't know if
Thank you.
Ellen, don't forget that.
Great program.
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation. Ellen, don't forget that UC Berkeley has a great languages program.
Yes.
Okay, Josh, you're up.
We tried something kind of similar, it sounds like you're saying, Ellen, where the pilot would hit the buttons to target objects to parent the camera to it, and then give the kid like a controller, an Xbox, a Logitech or something. They're more familiar with it. It's hard to break. There's no Windows button in the corner to hit. And it's a great way to distract them from any other interface, especially kids who maybe aren't reading yet. They get all the buttons, the ability to play, zoom in, zoom out without any of the extras.
Yeah, for sure. The one thought that we had with like the Xbox controller is that it might be a little bit too complicated, like too many buttons. So we need to test out. We have the wireless mouse. I just haven't tested it yet. But I'd like to hear more about what you all are doing. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and I'll say that our production studio lead has decided that he really wants to just make a custom joystick essentially. But we have plans to try to test a lot of these different things and find out what works best. But I kind of expect that a custom job is probably going to be the better solution.
I see John's comment in the chat. Once you arrive at the black hole, would that be the end of the journey? Yeah. Maybe we could have fade to screen full of spaghetti.
But that my thought was to if you're going to the black hole, are you going to dive into it? And what does that look like?
Well, once that happens, we have to stay true to the science, and therefore you cannot leave the planetarium now. From now on, you live in the planetarium.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you'll have a supermassive planetarium.
Yeah.
People would ooze out through Hawking radiation.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, so much. Thanks again to the mini grant committee. Thank you to Alan for your mentorship. And yeah, thanks everybody.
And another big thank you to you, Ellen, for a
Mhm.
great presentation. Thanks so much. This is kind of amazing. We're ending at the hour, which is rare. In
Ellen
fact,
is a
I'm going to
master of sticking to the schedule. I'm always amazed at her shows are always right on time.
Okay, I think I'm going to turn off the recording now.
You know, going to your bosses, we're recording again, and going to your bosses and letting them know that you thought, hey, there's some equity issue here. That's fantastic. That's very brave of you, I think. Not everyone would do that. That's really great. So keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I accidentally pressed the pause button instead of the stop button. How about that?